Highlights from the WikiLeaks story that's really shaken up Washington and capitals around the world. We'll talk about that and more on our roundtable with George Will, Democratic strategist Donna Brazile, Paul Krugman of the New York Times, and in Madrid this morning, Ahmed Rashid, the Pakistani journalist who is the world authority on the Taliban. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Let me go to you first, George. What about this leak? How bad is it for the war effort? And how bad is it for a government which really has to reassess what it does with state secrets?
Well, these were lethal without being helpful. Lethal in the sense that they compromised both methods and, more important, sources themselves. Not helpful in the sense that they're not a bit like the Pentagon Papers, which showed in the Vietnam War that the government internally had a very different understanding of what was going on in Vietnam than it was saying publicly. That's not the case here. These are redundant anecdotes about what we all knew from good journalism and honest government about this. What we're left with now is still the question of the mission. In your interview with Secretary Gates, he said the following: "We are in Afghanistan because we were attacked from Afghanistan." Notice the preposition. We weren't attacked by Afghanistan in the sense that we were attacked by Japan at Pearl Harbor. We were attacked from there. And National Security Advisor James Jones has said that we have to be there because otherwise the terrorists would have more space to plot and train.
Exactly.
We were attacked from Hamburg. In a sense, you can plot in this kind of war anywhere.
Well, yes, but the real ground war is in Afghanistan. And let me go to Ahmed Rashid, who is the authority on the Taliban. Ahmed, what is your assessment of how WikiLeaks and all the material and information that came out of that could affect the war?
Well, again, I don't think there has been any really major new information given in these WikiLeaks. The impact has been quite extraordinary in America, in Europe and other places, simply because this war has not really been properly followed by the public. The media has not followed it, and as a result, I think people have been quite shocked about the degree of detail and content that has come out. But I don't think anything drastically new has come out. Now, obviously, there is a risk of sources, etc., which the Taliban are going to follow up on.
Precisely, and I wanted to ask you about that. You know, already they have said that they're going to be searching and scouring this treasure trove. Do you foresee that there are going to be bodies turning up in Afghanistan amongst people who've really been helping the United States?
Well, I hope that, you know, a lot of these leaks are quite old, and people have moved on. A lot of the names may be false names. I hope we're not going to see bodies, but certainly this is something the Taliban are extremely good at following debates in the West, the Western media, debates in parliaments in Europe, in the Congress. They will have seen this new vote just now, where so many of the Democrats seem to be voting against the war. They are expert now at following up, and if there are people to be followed up upon, they will do so.
Well, let me put that to Donna Brazile and to Paul Krugman. The idea that they are really smart, they read the Western press, they have a very highly sophisticated, whether we like to think that or not, media operation.
Well, it put the Afghanistan war back on the front page, the longest war in United States history. Voters are weary of this war right now. Congress is worried about the funding, the strategy. I think this will give the administration an opportunity to once again talk about the mission. Before December, when the president has announced that he intends to reassess what they're doing. I also think it raises a serious question about Pakistan's involvement with the Taliban, and also whether or not Mr. Karzai is still up to the job of bringing the government together, reinforcing the police and the army. It raises a serious question about going forward in the timetable.
You know, when I look at this, people say, you know, we can't abandon Afghanistan, all that. I'm surprised that people aren't pointing out that basically the decision to abandon Afghanistan was taken 8 years ago. Right? 8 years ago, when the Taliban was on the run, when it might have been possible to really use the momentum to change this, that's when the Bush administration pulled the troops out of Afghanistan, pulled the resources away because they wanted to invade Iraq instead. And now you're asking Obama to recover from a situation where we've spent 8 years losing credibility.
But the thing is, he is trying to recover. He's had this big strategy. He's made a surge in Afghanistan. And right now, for instance, Bill Kristol of the Weekly Standard has written a memo to President Obama basically saying rescind the 2011 deadline. What do you think has to happen to make this war winnable for the United States?
Well, first of all, in his remarks to you, Secretary Gates semi-rescinded it by saying that, in fact, what comes in July 11, 2011 is fairly limited numbers of withdrawal. That's making it a fairly elastic deadline. But look what, and our friend in Madrid can comment on this. Secretary Gates said to you today, our purpose is to degrade the Taliban to a degree where they are willing to consider reconciliation on the terms of the Afghan government. Now that A, sounds like surrender, and B, the normal Afghan would say, give me a third choice because I don't like the Afghan government either.
Right. Ahmad Rashid, how did you read that the Taliban is expected to surrender or come into a reconciliation on the terms of the Karzai government?
Well, I think this is going to be the very big debate that takes place within the Obama administration come December when the policy review takes place. Because the other position to this is that, in fact, the US should start talks with the Taliban as soon as possible. And that will then trigger off much better attempts to try and bring about a regional cohesion, a regional alliance to support those talks. The Taliban, with all their interlocutors that they've been talking to so far, have made it clear that they want to talk to the Americans directly. Now, any such talks can't be based on conditions set by America, as Gates has just done. They would have to be free and open talks, and they would have to continue for some time. So I think once you have a dialogue going with the Taliban, then you, I think, can go to the Pakistanis and the ISI and tell them, now look, we're talking to the Taliban. This is the end game now. The surges will continue, talks will continue, but you now have to give a deadline for the end of these safe havens for the Taliban leaders. In other words, the Taliban leaders should know that their safe havens will only have a limited time frame, and negotiations will also have a limited time frame.
Well, lots to talk about on this particular issue, but let's move on a little bit. I actually asked Speaker Nancy Pelosi about Afghanistan, about the war vote, the war funding vote in the House, and whether she thought that the president needed to come out and speak more to the country about Afghanistan. This is what she said to me. Listen.
They're worried about their economic security, and that's what they want to hear from the president, is how we can increase the create jobs in our country as we reduce the deficit.
So there you have it. Economic security obviously is the #1 preoccupation, as it always would be wherever there are these huge problems of unemployment.